Now, in the class before Thanksgiving, I gave you a kind of working overview of the foundation of Hawaiian philosophical thought, which has to do with the way in which the self is put together. And I hope that you gained an appreciation for this. If you didn't take really good notes on it, or you missed class, a lot of this knowledge is summarized in the first 6 or 7 chapterlets of spirit medicine. People asked us for years to write that down, so we finally wrote it down and published it. And so those 2 little books, Journey to the Sacred Garden and Spirit Medicine, they kind of form 2 halves of a whole, which provide a very nice foundation from which to understand who you are and how this is all put together. Now, we'd like to sort of build on that tonight and talk for the first half about reality. And as you can see, I've sort of laid out 4 basic levels here on the board with some minuscule notes. I might throw in here right from the start that there are really 12 levels. There are 12 levels of reality, awareness, and experience. But Makua put a kapu on me. A kapu, that's like a restriction. He told me, you can talk about those first 4 that you like to talk about, but you can't talk about 5 through 12. And I said, why? And he said, because when talking about the first 4, you're giving everyone just enough information to get them going in the right direction, to get them going in that direction. And then you have to be quiet so that they can find their way on their own. And in doing so, you will eventually find your way into levels 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so forth and so on. And as you do, you will achieve the power that comes with that discovery. If I just tell you about it, you'll go, oh, and write it down, and that'll be that. But if you discover it on your own, you'll get the energy, the power that comes with that discovery. Now, I might throw in here that if I were sitting here with the chief talking about this stuff, he might not make the same distinctions that I'm going to make or in the same way. I've kind of put this together in a way that makes sense to me as somebody with Western mind. All right? We operate from that position, Western mind. With the chief, with Makua, it was very interesting because he would constantly shift back and forth between Western mind and indigenous mind. And with indigenous mind, for example, you don't begin at the beginning and the end at the ending. You start in the middle, and you work in both directions at once. And this was quite a challenge, I might add, for our workshop groups when he would come and speak. It was quite a challenge for them to follow what he was saying when he was talking about different levels of this and different levels of that. Because he'd start right in the middle, and then he'd zigzag in both directions, up and down and sideways. That's the way he worked. Now, from my perspective, a good way to begin to say a little bit about the nature of reality tonight from the Kahuna perspective is to observe that this world right here, this physical objective level that we all take so much for granted, this is what the Hawaiians would refer to as the first level. The first level of reality, awareness, and experience. And it's an objective physical level called Ike Papakahi. Now the word Ike, I-K-E, this is a Hawaiian noun, which means knowledge or experience. And those of you who've read my second book, Medicine Maker, are aware of the fact that Ike is also a word that refers to spiritual knowledge and spiritual ability. And Ike, in that frame of reference, is often passed within families. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, you inherited your grandfather's Ike, or you inherited your grandmother's Ike, because it often skips a generation. Some of you know that. In this case, we would be talking about certain clusters of abilities and qualities, all right, which have to do with spiritual knowledge and spiritual power. But Ike as a noun means knowledge or experience. Papa is something which is flat. The floor is papa. The top of this desk is papa. The ceiling is papa. So this is the word for a level. And kahi, K-A-H-I, is the number 1. So Ike Papa Kahi literally means knowledge of level 1 or experience of level 1. Now, I don't have to say very much about this level because you guys are all masters of dealing with this level. You've been dealing with it since you were born, and you'll deal with it until you graduate, until you make transition, okay? This is a level of action. It's a level on which we can eat and sleep and have careers and families and make love and have friendships. It's a level in which we can have careers and career goals and accomplish things and fail catastrophically at others. Right? It's a level of action. But here comes the secret. We experience this world the way in which we do because of 3 assumptions that we accept as valid. And we perceive through those assumptions kind of like perceiving through a cultural lens. The first of those assumptions by which we experience this physical world is that on this level of reality, everything is separate from everything else. Everything is separate from everything else. Okay, Troy is sitting up there. I'm sitting down here. There's absolutely no question. There's a sense of separation. I don't even have to belabor the point. And this sense of separation extends itself to people, to places, and to events. There's a sense of separation that dominates our experience of this world. And because we accept that assumption as valid, we perceive this world the way in which we do, with reference to separation. Assumption number 2. On this level of reality, awareness, and experience, everything has a beginning and an ending. Everything has a beginning and an ending. Your life began when you received your ha, when you took your first breath. Your life will end when you release your ha, when you release your last breath. It began when you were born. It will end when you make transition. Stories begin at the beginning, they end at the ending. You go to the movies. The movie begins at the beginning, it ends at the ending. This class began in August, it will end in 2 weeks. Everything has a beginning and an ending. And finally, on the first level of reality, in the physical world, every effect has a cause. That's the third assumption. Every effect has a cause. And we've talked about cause and effect when we talked about health, illness, and healing, so we don't have to say very much more about that. But because we accept these 3 assumptions as valid, everything's separate from everything else, everything has a beginning and an ending, and every effect has a cause, we experience this world the way in which we do. It's what allows the classical laws of physics and natural selection and cause and effect to work the way in which they do. Okay? Physical world. Now, shamans, in their essential role as healers, and this includes kahuna, all right? All physical medicine happens on level 1. Okay? Gynecology, gastroenterology, neurology, nephrology, all right? All of the ologies, all those ologies, you know, surgery, physical therapy, respiratory therapy, occupational therapy, yoga, exercise. These are all healing modalities that operate on level 1. Massage, working on the physical body. Acupuncture and acupressure. Now, acupuncture and acupressure are interesting because although you're working on the physical body, various pressure points and meridian lines, various points of power, you're actually affecting the energetic body. And you remember on the slides that I showed you last night from Alex Gray's pictures, his visionary paintings, Do you remember when I pointed out the physical body, the energy body, and the spiritual body? And on that first painting, you saw the physical body and you saw that halo of light around the physical body. That's the energy body. That's the energy body. And those lines, you could see the meridians and the chakras on the physical body itself. Acupuncture and acupressure are performed on the physical body in level 1, but they actually affect the energetic body on level 2. Because level 2 is the level of energy. Level 2, Ike Papalua. Ike, knowledge or experience. Papa, level. Lua means 2. Level 2. Now, Ike Papalua, the second level of reality, awareness, and experience. You notice that I'm repeating that for you. There's a key here. A magical key to understanding these levels of reality in which the shaman operates. The key lies in understanding that these levels are simultaneously levels of experience, levels of awareness, and levels of reality. And the shaman, in shifting their level of awareness, shifts their level of experience, and effectively jumps from one level of reality to another. It reveals that these levels of reality, awareness, and experience are also levels of consciousness. For example, level 1 would be the level of physical consciousness. Level 2, being the level of thoughts, emotions, and feelings, is the level of mental, emotional consciousness. Now, thoughts, emotions, and feelings. These are subjective phenomena. They are not objective phenomena. And one of the great problems in the field of psychology is the psychologist's struggle to be taken seriously as a hard science. And it's very, very difficult because psychology, by nature of what they're investigating the psyche, the human psyche. Now, the word psyche, this is a word I haven't used very much in this class. It's an interesting word because if you go back to the classical Greek term, you all remember your Greek, huh? I studied Greek, so I remember it. The word psyche was used to describe the organ of thought and emotion. The organ, it was considered to be an organ, despite the fact that it's subjective. The organ of thought and emotion. Now, this is a very interesting perception because in talking with you about the kahuna way of understanding the self, I revealed to you quite clearly that thought is part of the mental soul and emotion is part of the body soul, the lono and the ku. See, from the kahuna perspective, thought and emotion are products of two quite separate souls that have very different functions and have very different origins. They are both energetic states, and they both came from the same source, but they exist in very different states of quality. The Greeks combined the two into one, which they called the psyche. And so here's an interesting divergence between indigenous mind and Western mind, because that Greek view of the psyche has dominated Western psychology ever since. All right? And one of the uphill battles that psychologists and even psychiatrists face in being taken seriously as scientists is they're studying something which is subjective, which doesn't lend itself well to the scientific method. All right? This is why there's such an emphasis in experimental psychology. I remember when I took psychology in college, it was rats, 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 and more rats. You know, I got real tired of experimental psychology. I thought it was totally boring. This was an attempt by the psychologists to be taken seriously as hard scientists. But when you get into transpersonal psychology, you're studying something which by its very nature cannot be really subjected to the scientific method and is not subject to verification in experiments. Big problem. Big problem. All right? So, second level of reality and awareness experience. The level of thoughts, the level of emotions, the level of feelings. This reveals where your ku and your lono are. Your physical body is in level 1, but your ku, your emotional body, your emotional soul, your body soul, and your lono, your mental soul, those are in level 2. They're subject to phenomena. But they're real. Your thoughts and your emotions are real. That feeling of fear that you get when you get a letter from the Internal Revenue Service in July that says you're going to be audited, that feeling of fear is real. All right? That feeling of fear that you get when you break down on the freeway at midnight in a remote area. All right, that feeling is real. You know, I can't take your feelings or my feelings and lay them out here on the table and we measure them and we all agree that they're this big and they weigh so. We can't do that. They're subjective. Now, level 2 is also the level of energy. This is where your energy body is, on level 2. Energy is by nature a subjective phenomenon. Does this mean that energy is not real? Absolutely not. If I were to take one of these cables that goes to one of these light fixtures in the ceiling and strip it for you and show you the copper wire, all right, the copper wire is the medium which is carrying the current of energy. You cannot see the energy, but if you put your finger on the wire, bammo, you're going to feel it. That's because energy, by its very nature, is a subjective phenomenon. All right? This is the level of energy. Your energy body, which those with psychic awareness can perceive as an aura or a halo of light around the physical body, that exists on level 2. Now, level 2 is also the level of psychic awareness. All psychic experience happens on level 2. We're talking about telepathy, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, being able to hear the voice, clairsentience, being able to know, clairvoyance, being able to see, telepathy, being able to communicate, all right, from person to person or place to place across distance, déjà vu, precognition, knowing that something is just about to happen, extrasensory perception, which is called ESP. These are all second level phenomena. And they work on the second level. In fact, they're even expected on the second level because of the first assumption. Now, the first assumption on level 1 is that everything is separate from everything else. The first assumption on level 2 is that everything is connected to everything else. Now, this leads us into a very interesting discussion. By what is everything connected to everything else? How is everything connected to us? And the Kahunas had a very interesting perception of how these connections exist. It had to do with a substance which in the Hawaiian language is called aka, A-K-A. Now, aka has many meanings according to how the word is used. One of the ways in which it's used is the word for shadow. The shadow underneath my hand, that's made of aka. A reflection in the mirror, that's made of aka. But thought forms are also made of aka. Matter is made of aka. Energy is made of aka. The space between them is filled with aka. Aka is the primordial stuff out of which everything everywhere is formed. Now, this is a very interesting perception. And the Hawaiians understood that this aka is organized at the second level in a vast web or matrix or grid. And they called this matrix or grid the aka field. These are lines of etheric substance, and they serve as the medium for energy. They are what carry the energy. Now, the Akka field, the grid, the web. Do you remember all these grids that I was showing you? All these phosphenes, all right, in rock art? All these depictions of a web or a grid. Do you remember those pieces of red ochre from Blombos Cave 77,000 years ago with those the web or the net inscribed into them? Those were phosphenes, yes. But there are also depictions of the Akka field. The very first symbolic expressions that came forth out of the human mind are depictions of that web, that grid. And this is a dead giveaway that it's shamans who are doing this, because they perceive these interconnections in their moments of vision. Those of you who've read my unusual book, Spirit Walker, etc., will know that almost always I perceive this glittering, diaphanous, spider web-like, filamentous matrix or web or net as I go through something, whatever that something is, and end up connecting with the mind and soul of another man who lives in another slice of time. That's the Akka field in level 2. Now, there's something else I could throw in here about the Akka field. Science has shown that the Akka field is real. Here's a little piece that came out of Science News 4 or 5 years ago. It has to do with what astronomers call dark matter. Dark matter is Akka. Is Akka. Listen to this. If astronomers were in charge of a lost and found department, they would have been fired long ago. Good opening line. Most have come to terms with the notion that at least 90% of the matter in the universe must consist of some strange dark material that they cannot directly detect. More embarrassingly, astronomers have lost track of most of the baryons. What are baryons? Nobody's involved in science here. Baryons. Baryons are ordinary visible matter, which are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. We used to call them atoms. The new buzzword, baryons. They're ordinary visible matter. But we're dealing here with something we cannot detect with radio telescopes or optical telescopes or microscopes. We're talking about this mysterious substance called dark matter. Now, in talking about dark matter, before I go on with this, most of you guys are aware of the fact, I hope, this should have been part of your education, that in the 1920s there was an astronomer at Caltech named Fritz Zwicky, and he was studying the rotational vectors of galaxies. Now, don't ask me how you study the rotational movement of galaxies. I mean, this is out of my range. But what he was able to perceive was that there was not enough matter, visible matter, to hold galaxies in their present form. He was the one who came up with this term dark matter. There had to be some kind of invisible matter, which he called dark matter, that we cannot perceive, which is exhibiting a force, which is dark energy, which essentially holds the structure of reality in its form that it exists in right now. Without the presence of this dark matter, everything should be flying apart at explosion speed, like it did with the Big Bang. Now, the quantum people, the quantum mechanics gang, including Albert Einstein, got very involved with trying to prove mathematically that dark matter exists. It became known as Einstein's cosmological constant. All right? And the search for a unified field was one of his major goals during his life. He eventually abandoned it because he couldn't prove it mathematically. But in fact, Einstein made the cover of Science magazine back in, I think it was 1996, because astronomers have proven that dark matter actually exists. All right? So Einstein was right. It's what they also called the zero-point field. And those of you who know something about quantum mechanics know that the 0-point field is that field that exists on the second level in which particles are constantly winking out of in and out of existence. It has to do with the difference between a wave and a particle. Okay? This is the quantum field. This is the 0-point field. This is the Akka field. These are the superstrings of the superstring theory, for those of you who know about string theory. Right? Once again, here's the first paragraph. If astronomers were in charge of a lost and found department, they would have been fired long ago. Most have come to terms with the notion that at least 90% of the matter of the universe must consist of some strange dark matter that they cannot directly detect. More embarrassingly, astronomers have lost track of most of the baryons, ordinary visible matter made of protons, electrons, and neutrons. In the standard picture of cosmic evolution, so-called dark matter provides the scaffolding upon which the baryons collect. The scaffolding sounds like a grid or a ladder. You know what the scaffolding looks like on the outside of a building when they're building a building? This is the way this dark matter is organized, in precisely the way that shamans have depicted it in rock art. During the first several billion years of cosmic history, the baryons, mostly hydrogen, formed vast gas clouds. Some ended up in galaxies and galaxy clusters, but that accounts for less than half the original baryons originally in the clouds. New observations suggest that astronomers may have found the missing material just where theorists predicted, in intergalactic space. See, intergalactic space is not empty. It's actually the contrary. Listen to this. Over billions of years, the vast clouds of hydrogen gas condensed into a spidery network of filaments connecting galaxies and galaxy clusters. Remember that spidery stuff that you saw in the background of Alex Gray's paintings? That's it. And it's perceivable by people who can shift into the second level of reality, awareness, and experience. Stripped of its electrons, the hydrogen in the filaments cannot radiate light, and so it isn't easily detected. Instead, the Hubble Space Telescope found evidence of that hydrogen by searching for highly ionized oxygen, forged at the core of stars and dumped into space when the stars died in explosive death, the ionized hydrogen associated with the ionized oxygen, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. You know, and we don't want to get any more into this quantum stuff because that's not what we're talking about. But this is a very interesting observation. It's one of these examples of modern science rediscovering something which our Stone Age ancestors perceived 77,000 years ago or longer, and were able to express what they had seen. So you can see that somewhere along the line, all these theorists who've predicted that reality is formed of these strings, right? The strings are made of Akka, the superstring theory. Somewhere along the line, 2 or 3 of them are going to get the Nobel Prize. And I can just see all the Hawaiian elders sitting out there in Polynesia watching the Nobel Symposium on television, and here will be these scientists being lauded and applauded for their superstring theory. You can see all the Hawaiians sitting there in their aloha huts going. So they finally figured it out. Yeah? Here's the physical world. Solid. Here's the energetic world. There's the grid. There's the Akka field. And here is the spirit world. In order to get from this world into the spirit world, you've got to go through the grid. And in fact, you go through it every night when you go to sleep and you start dreaming. You just don't remember. It's through this grid that everything is connected to everything else, everywhere and every when. This is how psychic experience happens. All right, how many of you guys have had, now here's another working theory before we go there. The energy body in Hawaiian is called the Akka body. It is your Aka body. And because it's your Aka body, it can carry the energy in the same way that a copper wire can serve as the matrix to carry energy as electricity to these light fixtures. So your energetic body is actually your Aka body. And one working theory in Hawaiian thought has it that when we come into contact with someone or someplace, there's a fiber, a filament of Aka substance, which is established as a connecting link. Aka's it's sticky. All right? Now, Cassie and I have known each other for years, so there's a very strong connection between us. I've gotten to know some of you guys fairly well in this class as well. Some of you not so well. Some of you never come and ask me questions. Nevertheless, because we've been in connection, there are now fibers of Aka substance which connect all of us here in this room. Now, fibers, filaments, I've known Janet for years as well. So the filament between us is more like a string. Same thing with Cassie. Between me and my wife, it's like a cord or like a cable or like a rope. Because the more strongly you're connected to somebody, the stronger are these Aka connections. And it's through these Aka connections that all psychic experience work. How many of you have had the experience of sitting in a room or sitting in a car with a close friend or significant other, and you start thinking about something, and then that person turns to you and they start talking to you about exactly what you're thinking about? All right? Everybody's had that experience. That's telepathy. And what's happening is you're both listening in to the thought broadcasting that's going on, and you're listening in through the cords of connection between you. That's how that works. This is how clairvoyance works. This is how clairaudience or clairsentience works. This is how deja vu works. All extrasensory perception operates through the Aka field. Now, when I first came across this interesting concept, I was in Hawaii back in the middle 80s, and my phone bill was astronomical because all my friends were on the mainland. I was in Hawaii, and it cost twice as much to make phone calls from Hawaii to the mainland as it does to make calls from the mainland to Hawaii. Hawaiian Telephone figured that one out. Okay? So I thought to myself, gee, if I could make psychic phone calls through the Aka field, I could save a lot of money. So one day I'm at the beach, and I'm there with my kids, and it's a perfect beach day. I mean, the waves are just right for body surfing. There are dolphins out in the bay. There are birds in the trees. The trade winds are blowing. The sun is out. All the ladies have thong bathing suits on. It was a cool kind of day. My ku likes to go to the beach. So my ku is sparkling happily. Now, you remember that your ku is the sender and receiver of all psychic experience. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. So my ku was happy. So what I did, in my life, there's a kind of magic circle, and there are always about 8 or 10 people in that magic circle. These are my real family. Fortunately, my wife and children are members of my circle. They weren't in my first marriage, right? But there's always like very, very close heart connections with about a half a dozen or a dozen people. And so I picked one at random. I picked a guy who was living in Phoenix at that time, named Joe Schaefer. He and I were hippies together in the 60s, so we've known each other a long time, and we've shared a lot. All right? So we spent a lot of time together, and we love each other dearly. So I picked him at random. And what I did is I turned my attention toward him. Now, these Aka cords, these fibers of connection, are activated by attention. When you turn your attention towards somebody you know well, it activates the cords of connection. All right? And then I got in touch with my heart feelings for him. I mean, this man and I love each other. And so I just fired off these really nice, warm love impulses toward him. And then I tried to be able to perceive through the Aka cords of connection. And what I perceived, it was about 11 o'clock in Hawaii and about 2 o'clock in Phoenix with the time difference. I could see it was a weekend day. Everybody was home. They were watching someone on TV. There was lots of popcorn flying around. There was big steins of beer. Everybody was having a good time. The teenagers were in the garage with their heads in the car engine, that sort of thing. And, You know, I held the connection as long as I could, trying to perceive through it. And then, of course, sooner or later, one of my kids walked up to me and she had to go to the bathroom. So that broke the connection. But when I got home, okay, about 45 minutes later, because it's hot in the middle of the day, that's when you get the kids out of the sun or they get crisped. All right, I got them home, desanded their nooks and crannies, gave them lunch. They were little at that time. All right, and then picked up the phone. Beep, 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 beep. Called up Joe in Phoenix. First words out of his mouth were, "Gee, about an hour ago, we all started talking about you." See, that's the psychic phone call. What I had done is I had turned my attention towards him, activated the cords, and he picked it up. He picked it up. Now, this is something you can play with. This is something you can verify for yourself. I wouldn't suggest trying to connect with somebody when they're at work, because they're focused, they're concentrating on something. Pick a weekend. You know, when somebody's at home, they're just relaxed, having a good time. Turn your attention toward them like a meditation, and then get in touch with your heart feelings for them. It's the emotion, you see, it's the ku that fuels, that powers the connection. All right? And then hold your focus as long as you can. And then give it a few moments, maybe 5 minutes or so, pick up the phone, beep, 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 and call them and see what they say. This is how you know when the phone is just about to ring, and you know who's calling as well. I mean, all of us have had these experiences. This all works through the Akka field on level 2. Everything is connected to everything else through this field. Now, that's just the first assumption. Second assumption on level 2. Okay, on level 1, everything has a beginning and an ending. But on level 2, there are no beginnings and endings. There are only cycles and transitions. Cycles and transitions. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take the concept of energy, for example. What happens to your energy body when your physical body dies? What happens to your energy body when your physical body dies at the end of your life? Well, the answer is that nothing happens to it. It's just free of a physical body. It exists in a free state. This is how all the out-of-body experiences happen. Remember when we talked about out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences, lucid dreaming? All right? This is how it works. You know, your energetic aspect, which is carrying your soul cluster, is in transition. Energy is immortal. It's a law of thermodynamics that energy cannot be created or destroyed. But it can shift to a new state. And in thermodynamics, we're dealing with heat. This is what happens when our physical bodies die. This is what reveals to us the truth of reincarnation, the reincarnative process. See, reincarnation is not a phenomenon that can be proven or disproven on the first level, because it's by nature a second-level phenomenon. Everything at second level exists in cycles. For example, your life exists as a cycle. It began when you were born, it will end when you make transition. And that cycle is frequently depicted in rock art and in symbology as a spiral. The spiral can maintain its stability for a very long time, but it can change quite rapidly as energy either flows out of the spiral or into the spiral. This is how things work on second level. And of course, the third assumption on second level nails this down. The third assumption is that on the second level of reality, awareness, and experience, time is synchronous. Time is synchronous. That means that everything that ever happened in the past, everything that's going on right now, and everything that will happen in the future is all going on at once. There is no such thing as time on second level. When you've shifted into the subjective level of thoughts, feelings, emotions, energy, and psychic awareness, you're outside of the time-space continuum. For example, when you bring up a memory from your coup, a memory of your childhood, we did that last time. It's like you're really going back across, in my case, 50 years. And it's like I'm there again as a child. And I can see the trees, and I can smell the leaves in Central Park. And I can see the robins bopping along. All right? And I can see all my little friends in their snowsuits and so forth and so on. It's like I'm really there. That's because I'm actually there. I'm actually there. I'm actually perceiving through myself as I was at about 5 to 10 years old. This is a second level phenomenon. Time is synchronous. Now let me throw this into perspective. I'll give you an example of a second level experience. Those of you who've read my second book, Medicine Maker, are aware of the fact that there's a family I sometimes camp with up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. This is a family I've known since I was a teenager. I'm ashamed to say I haven't been camping with them since 1998, since the last elder passed away. I just haven't had the time to go up there. But I used to go up there and I'd camp with them every season. They have a piece of land up near the Hoover Wilderness area, which is near Bridgeport on the other side of Sonora Pass. All right, where 395, you meet up with 395 on the other side of Sonora Pass. It's really fabulous country. Really fabulous country. Well, every year we would go up there and we'd eat too much and we'd drink too much and we'd stay up all night talking, eating and drinking, and we'd have these long philosophical conversations. Went on for years and years and years as we all got older. Well, every year we would do the annual hike. This was actually more like a death march in the sense that none of us were in good shape to do this. All right, we're up at 8,000 feet for starters. And we would walk about 8 miles up this valley to this absolutely spectacular upper valley. But then we had to walk 8 miles back to camp. So by the time we're coming back to camp at the end of the day, we're suffering properly. All of us have moleskin on our feet. We've all got blisters from our boots. We're all tired to the max. And we're all thinking about those cases of beer and those margaritas in camp. Well, this is spectacularly beautiful country. And there are great big boulders of obsidian in the rocks up there. Obsidian is volcanic glass, the black glass, right? This is fabulous stone for making stone tools. And the Indians used to go up there in the summertime to get stone for their stone tools. So everywhere you're walking, you see these little black fragments of glass twinkling at you in the sunlight, everywhere. And they're usually broken. They're little scrapers or shards or arrowheads with a point broken off. They're everywhere. So I'm walking back down the trail. I'm following the person in front of me, putting one foot in front of the other. And my boots kick up this flash of black glass. And it's an arrowhead. And it is unbroken. It's complete. And I just stopped and I went, whoa. Because for the archaeologist, that's the ultimate, to find something like this. I love to find stuff like this. So the person behind me walks right into me, and the person behind them walks into them, and everybody, what's going on? So I picked up this arrowhead and I showed it to everybody, and everybody's going, whoa. Whoa. It's really cool to find one that's not been broken. Well, I could have put it back down, but somebody would have come along and stepped on it and broken it, so I decided to keep it. So I'm walking down the trail, and we hit that last long flat, which is about 1.5 miles long, and camp is at the end. And this is a flat where the valley, which is glaciated, comes down like this, and there are willow thickets. It's up high. Thickets of willows and scrubby birch trees, and along the edges there are juniper trees and Jeffrey pines. Beautiful country. But there's this river that snakes back and forth. It's more of a creek up there. It's the Walker River. It's the source of the Walker River. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder where the Indians camped when they came up here. And I'm holding this arrowhead in one hand, and I'm tuning in to the arrowhead, all right? I'm establishing an Aka connection with it. And I know that Aka cord is connected with the person who made it. And I'm looking across this flat area, and I see this rise right over the stream, on the other side of the stream. And I knew, boy, the archaeologist came out, I knew that that was the place where the Indians camped. Perfect. You could see people coming from up or down the valley. You could see the elk and the deer coming out of the thickets. There's water for the camp right there, and fish. There are golden trout up there. Okay? And as I'm real tired, end of the day, the light's real low, that yellow light's coming across from the setting sun, and suddenly, in front of my eyes, like Brigadoon appearing in the mist, I saw it. I saw the camp. I saw the lodges. I saw the smoke from the fires. I saw the dogs and the children playing in the river. I saw the men sitting around talking while all the women are working. I saw the meat drying on the racks in the villages. I could hear the children laughing. I could hear the dogs barking. I could smell the wood smoke. And then it was gone. That's a second level experience. That's a second level experience. That's called déjà vu. Or clairvoyance. I was seeing into something which is recorded in the Akka field. See, your own personal Akka body is where your memories are actually recorded. And it's that source that your Ku is accessing. Your Ku soul, your body soul is accessing for those memories that we talked about last time. Okay? That would be a second level experience. Now, healing techniques on second level, all energetic healing. Reiki. Reiki is a second level healing modality. Energy balancing and transfer, whether you do it with your hands or you do it with crystals or however you do it. To some extent, soul retrieval and extraction. Extraction work, where you're actually extracting the energetic aspect of an illness out of a person's body. Or you're reaching into the third level to find a lost soul part, and you're bringing the energetic aspect of that soul part back to somebody here in first level, and you're blowing it into their energetic matrix. This would be a second level healing technique. All right? These would be second level techniques. There are others, well, acupuncture and acupressure, right? You're performing it on the physical body in first level, but it's actually affecting your energetic matrix in second level. It's affecting your Akka body. This is how second level works. Now the third level is the spirit world, is the dream world. And this is why shamanic work is not the same as energy work. And people who are energy healers and people who are shamanic healers are operating on different levels of reality. All right? Now I say this with deliberation because there are a lot of people who think they're doing shamanic work who are actually doing energy work. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're not doing shamanic work. Because the shamanic work happens in the dream world, in the spirit world. This is where the spirits reside. This is where the shaman journeys in altered states of consciousness to connect with these archetypal forces in the dream world. All right? And the spirit world, all right, it operates with three assumptions. You thought you were going to escape, didn't you? In the same way that the first level and the second level, these are levels of action. The second level is a level of action, like the first level. It's a level in which we can form thoughts, we can form goals, we can form intentions with our lono on second level. And we can bring them into reality, into being on the first level. So the second level and the first level are both levels of action. The third level is more like the memory banks of your computer. It's more of a level of information, the dream world, the level of archetypes. And it operates by three assumptions. The first assumption is it converges on the first rule of the sacred garden. For those of you who remember the 4 rules of the sacred garden. In the spirit worlds, in the dream worlds, everything is symbolic. That's the first assumption. Everything is symbolic. The second assumption, in the spirit worlds, in the dream worlds, everything is part of a pattern. and exists in relationship to everything else. Everything exists as part of a pattern. You see, the spirit world is very much like a tapestry, which is being woven on an immense loom that spreads out across the time-space continuum. And the loom itself is the Akka field. The Akka field is what carries it. But what's woven into the pattern is woven by the dreamers. Now, in this sense, we are the creators of our part of the great pattern. All right? We human beings are world-class dreamers. In fact, we're universe-class dreamers. I mentioned this to you before, I think. If you look at this building that we're in right now, this room, it came into being in the dreaming first, in the dreaming of an architect. And then it was translated into blueprints with engineering so that craftspeople and plumbers and electricians and wall layers and floor layers and so forth and so on could recreate what had been dreamed and bring it into reality. This is why the traditional people, the tribal people, understand that the dream world is the real world. And this one is a projection of that one. This world that we're in right now, everything is changing all the time. But in the dream world, we're dealing with the level of eternity. When something has come into being in the dream world, there it is. And that means that everything that humanity has become, everything that we've achieved in our long voyage across time, is woven into our pattern. It's woven into our part of the matrix, our part of the tapestry. Everything, from the most exalted to the most debased. From the most exalted, you know, our great art, our architecture, our literature, our music, it's all there. In the pattern, in the spirit world. To the most debased, all of the criminal behavior, all right? All the exploitation, all the murder and mayhem, all the pornography, it's all woven into the pattern, and it's there forever, because we created it. See, this reveals something rather unsettling. I've mentioned to you that Lucifer and Ahriman have nothing to do with the archetype of evil. They're threshold guardians. But there is an archetype of evil, and this was humanity's great sin. We created evil. It did not exist before we created it. And now that we've created it, the genie is out of the bottle. And we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it. All those people are being burned alive in Iraq by other Iraqis. That's evil. Those are manifestations of the archetype of evil, which is loose in the world. And we created it, and it's part of the pattern. Now, in thinking about this, in thinking about level 3, at level 3, everything is a dream, and everything is symbolic. So I used to sit around on Makua's lanai at his house in Kapoho, and we used to have the most interesting conversations. I used to say to him things like, well, Makua, if everything is symbolic and everything is part of the dream, of what is everything symbolic and whose dream is it? That's a good question. Hey, maybe that would be a good question to ask you on your final exam. Of what is everything symbolic and whose dream is it? I wouldn't do that to you. He would laugh, you know, and he would look and he would say, well, it would be correct to say that at that level, not this level, but at that level, everything is symbolic of everything else, but especially of you, the perceiver. And the dream is everything's dream, but especially yours. You see, everything dreams. Everything. The trees dream, the rocks dream, the wood bugs dream, the viruses dream, the bacteria dream. Everything dreams. And it's through their dreaming that the great tapestry of the spirit world has come into being. So there's a co-creative relationship between the spirit world and this world. They co-create each other. It's kind of like the famous grilled cheese sandwich analogy. Right, you all know what a grilled cheese sandwich looks like. You got a piece of bread on the bottom, you got a piece of bread on the top, and you got the melted cheese in between. Right, the piece of bread on the bottom, that's the physical world. The piece of bread on the top, that's the spirit world. And you notice that they resemble each other, but they're not exactly the same. If you look at them carefully, they're not exactly the same. But when you try to pull those two pieces of bread apart, that grilled cheese is sticky. That's the Aka field in level 2 that hooks the two of them together. All right, so there's a co-creative relationship, and the Aka field is the matrix through which we go to get into the spirit world while very much awake. Psychoanalysis is dead. You don't need to pay a highly paid professional to interpret your dreams for you. That person cannot do that for you despite the fact that they have a PhD in something. That's because those are your dreams and only you can interpret them. Those dreams are being given to you. And the chances are that your alma akua, your oversoul, your higher self, which we described at some length in the last class, has something to do with that. Because that's one of the ways in which the oversoul communicates with its embodiment, by sending them dreams. All right? Now you know who the Sandman is. Mr. Sandman, send me a dream. Make her the cutest that I've ever seen. You remember that song? That's your Alma Akua. Alma Akua, send me a dream. Now, on the spiritual worlds, this is where we find the classic three-leveled world system, the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. The lower world, as we've said, is the dream world of nature. The middle world has largely been created by humans, and so it could be considered to be the dream world of humans. That's where the Bardo worlds are, that we go into when we die. That's where your sacred garden is, in the middle world of dream. And the upper worlds are the dreaming of the gods and the angelic forces and the higher spiritual beings beyond planetary solar development. You know, the Hawaiians had the same perception. The same perception. For the Hawaiians, Po is the spirit world, the world of darkness. Ao is the world of light. Is the world of light. And I remember talking to you about Makua's walking stick. In this part of the walking stick right here, you see the separation of the Po, of the darkness, allowing the world of light, the Ao, to emerge. Here it is, carved right into this stick as part of his story. This is the original Big Bang, the original creative event. And of course, it happened from the head of Ku. We talked about that as well. Ku is the platform, the foundation on which everything is built. All of this, everything that's carved into this stick is highly symbolic in that way. So Po, this is level 3. That is the dream world, the level of darkness, the primordial darkness. The lower world is called Milu. This is the lower world in Hawaiian. The middle world is called Kahiki, and the upper world is called Lanikeha. They had this same perception that shamans have everywhere of the lower, middle, and upper levels of the spirit world. Really quite beautiful. Healing modalities on the third level, all shamanic journey work, of course, which is devoted towards healing, would be a third level healing technique. Soul retrieval, when you're looking for lost soul parts, or you're neutralizing an energetic intrusion in somebody, this would be third level. Neuro-linguistic programming, for those of you who know what that is, NLP. Affirmations, talismans, power objects, objects of power. See, this walking stick is an object of power because it connects me to the spiritual essence of the chief. The chief now exists purely as his oversoul aspect, and he has a connection to this stick. I have a connection to this stick. That's how power objects work. When you have a favorite object that you like to wear, or you like to wear your father or your mother's ring, something comes into being when you focus your attention on it, and that connection begins to vibrate between the two of you. That's the way power objects work. That's third level. Now, there's one more level that I could say something about. And I'm not sure if it's really the fourth level or not, but I think of it as the fourth level. The fourth level is a state that all the great mystics across time have experienced. They've tried to describe it and they've failed. Hildegard von Bingen, Santa Teresa of Avila, San Francisco of Assisi, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Aurobindo, all of the great mystics across time have had the experience of fourth level. Fourth level is the great field of an ever-expanding oneness. There is only one assumption on the fourth level. Everything is part of the one. There is no sense of individuation. It's the source from which everything emerged, including the dream, and to which everything will eventually return. In fact, it could be argued that the spirit world is actually the dream of the source. That the source is dreaming, and the spirit world is the dream of the source. This is the divine field that Taoists call the Tao, spelled with a T, the Tao. It's the level that Buddhists call the Buddha field, or Buddha mind. It's the state of divinity that Christians call God, that Native Americans now call the Great Spirit, that Islamic people call Allah, that Jews call Yahweh or Jehovah. This is the unitive field. The unitive field. And it's often described by mystics as the state of cosmic consciousness. Remember, I told you that all of these states are on the same time levels of awareness, levels of experience, and levels of reality. There are also levels of consciousness. Level 1 is the level of physical consciousness. Level 2 is the level of mental emotional consciousness. Level 3 is the level of spiritual consciousness. And level 4 is the level of cosmic consciousness. All right? It's the field to which everything will eventually return. Everything which is a manifestation of it. Now, it cannot really be described. And in saying that, I'm guilty of having tried to describe it. For those of you who will eventually stagger through my autobiographical trilogy, in Vision Seeker, the third book in the trilogy, there is a chapter called The Voyage to the Source, in which both I and my future self, Nainoa, engaged in a joint venture into the nature of the source. And I tried to describe it because I had to try, but I feel that I failed. Because it really cannot be described, but it can be experienced. But you've got to be very careful. You've got to be very careful. And I would suggest that if you ever decide to go in that direction, you might have a look at that chapter in Vision Seeker before you do. Because if it hadn't been for my alter ego, my friend in the future, pulling me back out of that source, I doubt that I would have returned. And that meant my physical body would have died, and my wife would have not been very happy about that. All right? And I would have ceased to exist as a soul. It's what the Hindus call nirvana. It's the threshold of nirvana. And when it opens up, there it is. But it's beyond the spirit world. And it's not the same thing as second level. This is the holistic dimension of the source, in which there's only one assumption, that everything is part of the one. Okay? It's what Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, who lived, I believe, in the 13th century, maybe it was the 14th century. Meister Eckhart, there are a number of these sayings and aphorisms collected by Matthew Fox, the theologian Matthew Fox. There's a wonderful book called Conversations with Meister Eckhart. In fact, it's not impossible that Matthew Fox is the descendant of Meister Eckhart, the descendant self. There's something that Meister Eckhart says that captures this beautifully. This is what he said. The eye with which I perceive God is the same eye with which God perceives me. That's a level 4 perception. The eye with which I perceive God is the same eye with which God perceives me. You see, your eyes are God's eyes, and they see in both directions. They see in both directions. You know, you come up to this realization that this alternately wrathful, alternately beneficent, authoritarian father figure called Jehovah or Allah, the way in which we've perceived it in our Judeo-Christian Islamic faiths, is really a form of mythology. It's really a form of mythology. And I think in the time in which we live, we've outgrown the need for an authoritarian father figure who demands our worship and our deference. I think it's time to upgrade the archetype. I'm writing about that right now. What remains to be said? Do you have any questions about these first? As I've said, there are 5. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 levels. You will eventually find your way there. It really pulls a lot of the strings together for this class. Suddenly you have a framework in which to fit all this information I've been feeding to you. All right, this is the framework in which it fits, very simply portrayed.